Hello everybody, I'm Rene Ramos, director of the Lynn and Lewis Wolfson II Florida Moving Image Archive, and this is Rewind, the show that looks back on Florida's past with historic film and video. It's time for another trip back into the past, so sit back, relax, and enjoy another episode of Rewind.
Good morning and welcome again to Newswatch. I'm Michael Putney. Crime does not pay. That is a truism every school kid learns, even if it's not entirely true. Now, it is true that reporting about crime pays. Those stories fill our TV screens every night and our newspapers every morning. Most of the stories are predictable, trite, and hackneyed, written by rote. When they're not, they're usually written by EDNA. And as New Yorker writer Calvin Trillin has said, when you say EDNA in Miami, most people know that you're talking about Edna Buchanan. She is the superb police reporter for the Miami Herald, winner of a Pulitzer Prize in 1986, and author of a new book entitled The Corpse Had a Familiar Face, covering Miami, America's hottest beat. Also joining us this morning is Homicide Lieutenant Mike Gonzalez, who may be one of the few people in Miami who has seen more mayhem than Edna Buchanan, and he is the subject of most of a chapter in her new book. Edna and Mike, good morning. Thank you for coming. And I will call you by your first names. I've known you both for
a long time.
Edna, you are a person who is almost obsessed by the most violent crime that there is, murder. And it seems to me that you are the ultimate rational person trying to explain the ultimate irrational act. Would you say that's close, or?
I guess it is. A good reporter's consciousness is always raised by the plight of someone downtrodden or jerked around by the system. And you can't be more downtrodden or jerked around than murdered. Mm-hmm. And I think that those are the victims who can't speak for themselves. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I'm so interested in most of those cases.
Right. Yeah, it seems to me, and I've read your work now for 10 years, I was a colleague of yours, I'm proud to say, for 4 years. It seems to me that in all of your stories, beneath the facts which are reported accurately, there's a sense of moral outrage when you write about the victims of these crimes often. Do you think that there is a sense of moral outrage in what you write? Do you feel that?
Yeah, you can never become callous to it. You know, you can't grow calluses on your heart, and you see these victims. And if anything, over the years, I've become more sensitive to the plights of the victims, because often you know what they don't. You know, the survivors, the surviving victims, you know that they may well be victimized again by the system because justice is so rare.
Mm-hmm. Mike Gonzalez, let me read this to you. Quote, Mike Gonzalez is the best cop I know, tall and lanky. He affects the somber dress of a funeral director or a priest with small gold-rimmed reading glasses and dark suits. And the reading glasses are right there. That is Edna Buchanan's description, and as usual, it's pretty accurate, isn't it?
Well, it's flattering, really.
How long have you known Edna Buchanan, Mike?
About 20 years.
And you first met at Pross Liquors in Coconut Grove, I believe.
That's right. It was the first time I ever seen her.
Why don't you tell me about that moment? It's funny in the book. I mean,
well, it was a long time ago, maybe 18 years ago or something like that, or 20 years ago. Right. And at that time, there weren't too many female crime reporters. Mm-hmm. And whatever reporters were working the police beat, they were the kind that wouldn't step over a crime scene rope. Now, we had a homicide there on Grand Avenue in Coconut Grove. It was a holdup of a liquor store, and a man was killed. And we had a rope around the crime scene to keep everybody back. And I look across the way there, and here comes Edna, stepping over the crime scene rope, coming into the crime scene.
Stepping daintily, I think, in a pink dress, or she hiked her pink dress up daintily, you're quoted as saying in the book.
Yeah, I had no idea she was a reporter. I thought she was sightseeing, and I went over to talk to her about it.
Talk to her? I mean, in the book, Edna says, you say...
He threatened to arrest me.
Yeah.
In fact, he promised to arrest me.
But he didn't.
No.
And you turned, obviously, into friends over a period of time. Mm-hmm. What is it about Mike Gonzalez? What is it about the police detectives whom you admire so much? What are some of those qualities? I don't mean to embarrass you, but I know that Edna feels that, you know, the best detectives have certain qualities.
That's right, and the best detectives, like Mike, are people who are sure of themselves sure of what they're doing, sure of their manhood, sure of whatever, and they're not afraid to talk to the press. The others that are very paranoid usually have a reason for it. Either they're not quite sure what they're doing and they're afraid they're maybe, you know, messing up the case, or they're trying to cover something up that they've already done wrong. And so therefore they don't want to talk to the press. The reporter's the last person they want to talk to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mike Gonzalez, I know from my personal experience that you are one of the detectives who, if you're at a crime scene, and if I've been there or another reporter gets there, we're not going to try to bother you while you're obviously in the midst of doing something that has to be done that moment, but you will talk to reporters. A lot of police officers won't. Why is that?
I try to do that. I try to be open. I think that's the way we should be. And I work hard at trying to be that way because I think it's necessary for our department and for the community. However, let me tell you how difficult it is for most policemen, for me and for most policemen. Look at all the problems you have. There's a whole lot of good reasons why it's best not to be talking to the media. When policemen talk about things in the police station, they don't have to be accountable for it. But when you talk to the media, everybody in the world hears what you had to say, they see what you had to say, and they hold you accountable. And look at all the mistakes you could make. At the beginning of an investigation, you can reveal too much information, right, and put the case in jeopardy. You might say things without even thinking that will offend the family of the victim who was killed, right? Mm-hmm. You might say something that the state attorney is going to get angry about and be unhappy about because we're revealing too much of the case before the trial. Sometimes when an investigation gets closer to the trial, the judge gets angry with us, right? And then on the department, our very own partners, our immediate bosses sometimes get jealous when we get too much attention from the media. And they feel like you're taking the credit away from them. They feel like you're grandstanding and looking for publicity when you're just trying to be open, see? Right. So there's so many ways you can alienate the whole world that it's a lot easier for most policemen to just keep their mouth shut and do their job.
Just not to
talk. And this is what makes EDNA so outstanding. That in spite of most policemen who are that way, and most public officials who are that way, and the public themselves who are that way, EDNA still gets the story. Mm-hmm. She does the stories accurately. They're interesting. She's got a nice twist to make that suspense in each story, and she writes like sometimes 20 stories a week. I don't know how anybody could get the information and write it so well and do so many at the same time.
You are a very prolific writer. In fact, in your book, you say that when you were a young reporter on the Miami Sun, was that the name of the paper before it became the Sun Reporter?
Miami Beach Daily Sun.
The Miami Beach Daily Sun, that you were the only reporter for a period of like 8 months or something, and you wrote obituaries and police stories and political stories, everything. I mean, you really learned the hard way how to become a reporter.
Yeah, that was my education in journalism because I never took journalism in college or high school. Mm-hmm. So it was learning the hard way, and I got into the habit of writing so many stories so fast and always having extra stories in case we needed them to fill the space. I covered everything. I even picked the dogs for the sports department. Sometimes wrote the letters to the editor, covered politics, celebrity features. So it was a wonderful way to learn the business.
Let me ask you, Edna, let me ask you a question that I'm sure that people are sitting at home and they're kind of wondering, gee, here is this pretty kind of soft-spoken woman. Why is, why does she want to be in the midst of gore and violence, and you've seen 5,000 dead bodies? I mean, I think that some people might say, and maybe it's a sexist kind of a question, but it's a reasonable question too. I mean, you are seeing human beings often at their worst. You see the results of at least human beings at their worst. I mean, are you not, in a sense, off-put by a lot of this? Or, I mean, don't you get kind of worn out or, as you say, calluses on your heart?
Well, I think it's the real nitty-gritty. The fascination is that you can't learn as much about people on any other newspaper beat. It's all there. Comedy, tragedy, violence, greed, sex. You have it all on this beat. It's never dull. And the real joy of it all is that sometimes you can change things, you can make things better.
All right, well, let's cite one case where obviously your reporting, your enterprise reporting made a huge difference, I think, to this community and to the perception of justice, and that was the Arthur McDuffie case, obviously. You uncovered facts in that case that eventually caused the trial, and the outcome of that trial notwithstanding, it was, I think, one of the fine moments of journalism that I know of in the history of this country. You must be proud of what you discovered in the McDuffie case.
Well, you have real emotions, mixed emotions about it. Mm-hmm. You know, someone after the trial asked one of the jurors how he felt about it, if he felt it would have been better if Arthur McDuffie had remained a traffic statistic. And the juror said, well, I'm sure that the people killed in the riot would have thought so.
Of course, that juror lived in Tampa, Florida, didn't live in Miami, I must say.
Didn't care about what
and
happened,
didn't care what happened. You know, one of the things, Mike, that Edna makes a point in her book is that Miami sometimes doesn't seem to get angry about some of these heinous, violent crimes that you see in your work because there's no sense of community. People are transients. They've come here from somewhere else. But I personally think that although that's partly true, that there is a sense of community, and people do get angry about
yes,
these.
I believe that. Every once in a while it seems like we're not one community because we all come from a lot of different places. But by and large, I think this community does stick together. I think when anything important does come along, you can see clearly that we get a good, strong response from the community to show they approve or to show they disapprove about things. I like Miami, and I like the way people respond here.
Right. Well, I think that makes three of us who like Miami. I think we're all devotees.
Growing up a lot.
All right. Edna, there are some Chamber of Commerce people, and I don't mean to denigrate the Chamber of Commerce. It's one of the more enlightened ones in the country. And at the same time, I know that there are business people, let's say, who would just as soon not see Edna Buchanan write in the Miami Herald because you keep writing about all of these terrible things, and maybe if you didn't write about it, they would just go away or people wouldn't pay attention. Do you get calls or letters at the Herald saying, you know, why do you prominently talk and write about all this terrible
Not as many
mayhem?
as you might think. In fact, it's very rare. Maybe my editors get them, but I don't.
Do you hear from your editors? I mean, do the editors say, tone it down, Edna?
No. Occasionally, they'll, you know, they often will take some perhaps unpleasant detail out of a story. They won't use any pictures of a body, a dead body, or blood in the paper because they said it's read at breakfast time, and they don't want to upset the readers. But on the other hand, they don't. I have to give them credit for not trying to rein in these kinds of stories, and I think they're great deterrents. If you have a terrible accident picture, if the Herald has 500,000 readers and a few thousand of them are sort of made aware so they drive more carefully for the next 24 hours, maybe you've spared somebody else. So I think a lot of that so-called deterrent reporting is important.
All right, well, we'll come back and talk more about deterrent reporting and everything else that Edna Buchanan does in just a minute. Welcome back on this Sunday morning on Newswatch. We are talking with Lieutenant Mike Gonzalez of the Miami Police Department and Edna Buchanan, the author of this book, which is entitled The Corpse Had a Familiar Face, Covering Miami, America's Hottest Beat. Kind of a funny title. Edna, let me ask you, in this book, you speak admiringly of a lot of police people and of the work they've done in many cases, but in the Christopher Wilder case, you're very critical of the way that case was handled. You believe that Beth Kenyon and Rosario Kennedy, in fact, as far as I can tell, might have lived if the Metro detectives handling that case had been better, more competent.
It was Rosario Gonzalez.
Rosario Gonzalez, yes, I beg your pardon, yes.
Yeah, well, I think that they gave Christopher Wilder a head start by not taking these missing persons cases as seriously in the beginning as they should have. And these were two young, responsible women who, one was engaged to be married, the other one was had a job teaching, was known for her reliability. Her family and her roommate reported her missing at once, and yet nobody really followed up on it too much because they don't tend to take missing persons case, maybe because they were young, attractive women and they felt, well, they just went off with a boyfriend or something. But they didn't get into it right away. I called up Christopher Wilder, but they never even did. I got his answering machine. But they never even went up to see him. They never even asked him if he knew anything about these missing women. And then the next thing you know, Christopher Wilder was traveling across the country, dumping women's bodies by the side of the road. And I think that perhaps he could have been stopped sooner.
You are really haunted by some of these cases, aren't you? I mean, you live with them at the time, but they don't fade away. I mean, they're very vivid memories for you.
I don't like unsolved cases or missing persons that aren't found or bodies that are found and never identified. I want to know who they are, where they disappeared to, what happened, who did it, why did it happen. You know,
all the questions, in fact, that Mike Gonzalez is trying to ask at the same time.
Questions I always ask him.
That's why we have a kind of a love-hate relationship between police people and reporters. We have a whole lot of things in common. like going after the truth, being investigators, trying to find out what happened. The other side of it is that we don't always look to publicize everything. We make mistakes sometimes, like maybe with Wilder and other cases. And
that was, in your defense, I'd like to jump in and say that was not your case. You did not handle the Wilder case.
That as an example.
I know
don't even know that was a mistake. But I say we do make mistakes. And when we make mistakes, we don't like the whole world to know about it. And we're not really looking, we're not in the business of trying to publicize everything we do. So we have this dichotomy, we have this conflict of, we do the same thing, but we don't always want to tell the whole world about it.
Right.
And that makes us sometimes, makes it more difficult for her all the time to get the story.
Right. You know, she says at one point in this, in the book that that the police people are different. I'm looking for the quote and I'm not finding it right here, but she is saying that in a sense, policemen close they circle the wagons and they don't usually let outsiders in. They live together in little communities. Sometimes policemen marry police women. I mean, it's sort of
us and them attitude.
It's an us and them attitude in many ways.
Well, I think that applies more to the younger policemen that are new at it. They're afraid of the criticism. They don't trust themselves. But actually, a real busy policeman in this community who's been around a little while and get some confidence in himself, and they don't see it that way. They try to deal with everything openly once you have a little experience at it.
Mm-hmm. Edna, you know police work from both sides, from being both a professional reporter, but you were married to a policeman at one point in your life. It's kind of a... I mean,
very briefly.
You relate the episode, it's very funny, as you related in your book. The marriage did not last terribly long, but how are they going to portray that in the movie, I wonder?
I don't know. I think they may just ignore it.
Mm-hmm. The movie that's going to be made, when is it going to be? You say you've seen...
Scriptwriters take a lot of license. Well,
your life is going to be more interesting in the movie than you say than it really is, or?
My sex life, anyway, I guess. I don't know. But they've done a treatment, and the next step will be the script. And of course, you never know if it'll really be made. A lot of movies, scripts are written, and the movies themselves aren't shot. But Disney Productions did option the film rights. And some other studios are interested if Disney doesn't pick up the option, because we've had some calls. But since it is Disney, there's probably a greater chance of the movie being filmed because they have the backing, they're a big studio, and they seem really interested in it.
Who would you like to see play Edna Buchanan in a movie?
Almost anybody, as long as it's not Bette Midler, because they have her under a long-term contract, and I think it could be.
I think that would be the most unlikely casting choice. I was thinking Deborah Winger. How would you settle for Deborah Winger?
Sure,
would that be okay?
Sure. The scriptwriter said they had in mind as they were working on it, and the scriptwriter is the one who wrote the script for Desperately Seeking Susan. They said they had in mind Diane Keaton, but of course that's all premature. No one knows.
Well, la-ti-da. Let me quote one of the many quotable lines from the book. You wrote, "A woman in my occupation has to convince the cops to forget that she is a woman. You want them to think of you as a confidant, a professional who will always be fair, or if nothing else, a piece of furniture, someone they are so used to seeing that they forget that you are there." How could you ever forget that Edna Buchanan is there?
No, you could never forget that she's there. You really know when she's around. She's a real super good reporter, and even though you can never forget her presence, the fact that she's a woman doesn't last. That feeling doesn't last very long. Everybody that really knows her has a lot of confidence and trust in her.
Right. Edna, let me ask you. Obviously, this is kind of a trite question, I admit, but tell me about some of the more memorable, I mean, the murders that you have covered that just stand out in your mind that you can't forget, or the ones that you've written that, most vivid murders.
Well, I think some of the most interesting cases, of course, would be the naked man that was found walking at dawn in a residential neighborhood carrying a woman's head, which he threw at the first policeman who approached. And then, of course, there's the deranged school teacher who murdered 8 people in a Miami welding shop because he felt that he'd been overcharged for repairs to his bicycle. And of course, the case, I think, was Mike's case of the father of 31 children who was murdered by an uninvited guest to his surprise party for his 53rd birthday.
I think, as you recall that story, or as you reported in the book, you called and you said to one of the children, and how many children are in the family? And the first daughter who answered the phone said something like 31 or 32, and you thought they were joking.
No, I thought that they were just sort of unhinged by grief and didn't realize what they were saying. So I just called back later and talked to another family member, and they started counting it up and said 31. So it was really true. This man did have 31 children. And they all really liked him. It was an outsider, a stranger, that killed him at his birthday party.
You know, stylistically, and I have to say that it always struck me as I read your stories, which are so stylistically distinctive, that there are a lot of adjectives that if another Miami Herald reporter tried to put those things in the Miami Herald, they'd be deleted by an editor. How do you get some of those descriptions into the paper that other reporters, and I say I used to be one at the Herald, that nobody else can get in? I mean, you've got some real clout.
I don't know. I think it's the way you write the story. You can't be flip. There are certain cases in which you can do certain things, like in the case of Gary Robinson, the man that was killed at the the fast food place. The man
he died hungry. Yes, that was the famous lead.
Ex-convict. He came in. He was drunk and loud. He came into the fast food place, pushed his way to the head of the line in front of everybody else, and the young, feisty woman behind the counter sweet-talked him and said, "Look, that isn't nice. You've got to go to the end of the line. Be courteous." And he sort of went along with it and said, "Okay," went to the end of the line. And when he finally got to the counter and asked for his chicken dinner, they had run out of chicken. And he became so infuriated, he punched the counter girl and wound up being shot and killed by a security guard. And in that kind of circumstance, you could write that kind of a lead, you know, because I think...
And the lead
of the story was Gary Robinson died hungry. And if it was another kind of case with another type of murder victim, you couldn't use that kind of lead. You just have to, I think you build up confidence with editors the same way you do with police officers. And I think, too, another little secret to that is to go on reporting right until deadline and turn the story in late before they have to, so they don't have too much chance to fiddle with it before it gets
Mike
in the
Gonzalez,
paper.
I can tell you when I went to work at the Herald, somebody said, use the Edna Buchanan tactic with your editors, turn it in at the last second, then they can't fiddle with your copy, and Edna is unsurpassed.
But it's not that I hold the story back, just that I keep on reporting, because you're never really finished. How do you know when you're finished? There always might be another witness, another piece of information. So you just keep working it till the last minute. So you have two benefits there. You've got the best, latest information, maybe something that could really change the story, and you don't give the editors much time to do much damage.
Mike, you know, it seems to me from what you and Edna have said, and obviously from reading her work and reading the book, there is a lot about crime scenes, particularly homicides, that that is strange but very, very funny. I mean, there is a lot of macabre humor in these scenes. I know that humor is one of the great defenses against tragedy, but in fact, I mean, sometimes you go there and in the midst of horror, I mean, there are some very funny things that happen, aren't there?
Yeah, that's maybe a terrible thing to say, you know, in the face of such tragedy. But I think that because there's so much ugliness in the world and so much violence, that if it wasn't for the humor, we'd all crack up, you know, we'd all go crazy. But you can't help it. I guess maybe because there is so much tension that things happen and they are funny. You know?
What are some of the funniest things that you can recall from these sad and sometimes tragic scenes? I mean, the book is larded with them, but what are a couple?
Well, it's hard to say, but as Mike said, if you didn't laugh, you would cry, and it's better to laugh. And I guess it's sort of a battlefield kind of humor. It's funny, I can't recall any specific cases offhand.
Well, it's not entirely fair to say, give me an instance, but there are plenty in the book, and the book is a terrific read. And as we were saying before we began this program, a lot of people up north, they might say, well, gee, why do I want to read about more crime in Miami? But I can say personally that this is not just simply about cops and robbers in Miami. I mean, you've written a book about human character and what happens to character under some of the most adverse conditions. I mean, you don't really look at this as just simply another Miami crime book, obviously. You didn't set out to write that.
No, it's a book about people, about love and death and mysteries and feminism and animals and, you know, a lot of universal themes, I think.
Yeah, when you talk about animals, you are famous among your friends for your love of your cats, and then you do have a dog as well.
Yeah.
Rocky Ralph.
Yep.
And the cats are Flossie and
and Misty Blue Eyes and Baby Deer. And Baby Deer, his mother was the mascot at the Dade County Jail. She was a gray striped cat named Trustee. Baby Deer was the runt of the litter.
Yeah, you know, when you hear the names of your cats, I mean, you know, I think people say exactly what I'm saying, which is, you know, at heart, you are just a softie, Edna. I mean, you are really a very loving, kind, and gentle person who somehow has immersed herself in, I mean, these terrible kind of violent scenes. I mean, it seems a little paradoxical in a way. Or
well,
is it?
I don't know. I think you really have to care to do this job.
Mm-hmm.
Like a while back, I talked to a really bright young reporter for a paper up in Kentucky, and he was talking about the dirtbag murders that aren't worth reporting, where the victims aren't worth taking note of. And there really is no dirtbag murder. Mm-hmm. You know, the story is always there, and some poor woman found dead by the side of the road in her nightgown wanted to live as much as any of us, and the illegal alien found dumped out in the Everglades in a burned trunk. They all wanted to live as much as any of us.
Mm-hmm. And I hear Mike Gonzalez saying,
Sure, policemen care like that about every one of their cases. This is a good book. I think everybody ought to read this book because it deals with a lot of things like people and violence and love and all of that, but it also helps people to understand a little bit more about what policemen too. Everybody's interested in policemen, mm-hmm. and all they get is a bunch of distorted Miami Vice type of cops on TV that they get.
But this is a more true and accurate portrayal.
This is what real cops are about, mm-hmm. good ones and bad ones, and mm-hmm. it's very believable, it's very true, very accurate, and it'll help everybody to understand a little bit more about this whole business with the police and our job in the community and the media. Mm-hmm. So a very, very excellent book.
All right. Well, as long as we're giving endorsements, I'll give my own endorsement. The Corpse Had a Familiar Face, Covering Miami, America's Hottest Beat, is a very readable, terrific book. I was up until about 3 a.m., in fact, finishing it last night. And Edna, I wish you the best of success as you go out and make an author tour. Who's going to cover crime in Miami while you're gone? Joan Fleischer.
Right. There are a lot of people there who
Sure.
do a good job.
Okay. Well, I wish you good luck with the book. And on October 31st, I think you say West 57th Street, seen here on Channel 4 Saturday nights, I think at 10 p.m., is going to do a portrait of you.
Yeah, I think that's the date it's set for. I'm not sure, but I believe it is.
Okay. We will be watching for that. And Mike Gonzalez, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Good luck to you. And Edna,
Thanks.
Thank you. And it's a great book. Read it.
Thanks. I'm glad you like it.
Thank you for watching. I invite you to enjoy me here next week on Newswatch for another newsmaker. Until then, I'm Michael Putney. Have a great week.
That's about it for this edition of Rewind. Just time to remind you that Rewind features historical film and video from the Lynn and Lewis Wolfson II Florida Moving Image Archives. To see more from the Wolfson Archives collections, visit our website, wolfsonarchives.org. You can search the archives catalog and watch video online. And be sure to connect to our YouTube channel, where you will find hundreds of carefully curated clips, or link to the Wolfson Archives Facebook page to keep up with our busy calendar of historical happenings. Until next time, I'm Rene Ramos. Thanks for watching.